I do feel called to do things, and the YouTube thing's maybe a little bit part of it, but I had an idea for something that I want to try to make happen in the real world. Um, One thing I'd really enjoyed was I did a discipleship kind of thing, an internship after high school, um, and um, they had a pretty good model, with trying to get the older students to directly, they would like assign people, so you had a certain amount of time to kind of mentor and pour into them. But it was all just based out of like a mega church, and nobody ended up with much useful vocational skills or life skills at the end of it. And I went to Bible college as well for a while. That was good because I learned better study habits, but that had none of that aspect. And I was a little bit older. I tried to help some of the young guys that I saw there, but there's just some people go to colleges, they just flounder. They don't know what they're doing. Even at a Christian college can't do the work for you if you don't have a guide. But now, and I've been doing this. I've been working in carpentry for a long time, and now I'm in a position where I'm training guys. I'm training young guys, and even in that, I find that there's so much like connection between the actual like doing the work and these spiritual concepts. And so I kind of had an idea that I want to start some sort of an after high school kind of program or something that has that spiritual thing, but is also centered on learning trades, because guys aren't going to college as much.
Right.
And if they are, they don't know what they want to do. And so they end up living in their parents' basement. If they get a job, it's not skilled or anything. They just work in retail or whatever. And I think that there's kind of this thing of like, that men need an adventure. Jordan Peterson talks about that kind of thing, talking about that guy standing on the corner holding the pink shopping bag, and if somebody gave him the opportunity to go have an adventure, he would. Well, I think that it's a little bit more mundane, but the skill of like learning how to work with your hands and build actual things it's kind of necessary, and I think that part of the spiritual strength that people had long ago is that they had to do all that stuff, and they would, maybe they would think of that stuff maybe not as inherently spiritual, but I think that it is. And I think that um that's it's because it's in the connection. It's connecting what you do with your body, with your hands,
No,
to these
you're
spiritual
absolutely right.
lessons.
You're absolutely right. And one of the problems we have right now, and I think this is specifically a kind of problem that younger men have, is all of this stuff is abstract. It is
Yeah.
not part of the real world. I mean, I'm appreciating this conversation. I appreciate my interactions with people through the internet. But one of the reasons we got together in Germany, Paul and I and the other people with the Bridges of Meaning Festival in Landau earlier in August, was that let's try to make this more real. To actually put human flesh to our conversations. And it's not just conversations that need to be made real, but the point of living has to be made tangible. You have to have something that you're holding on to. Yeah, you can write, but the writing isn't any good unless it turns into a book that someone's holding in their hands. That is to say, or in some way is getting through to the real person and affecting them. And there's nothing, I mean, when I look at the state of, for instance, housing these days, I just see in America, stuff just seems to like blow up and suddenly it's there. You got a frame, you put some sheetrock and do something to the walls, put some mud here, get a paint, and boop, it's practically builds itself. And I think what we need to learn is the value of well-made things. And so it's like a double challenge. One is a challenge for you to teach younger people, younger men, but girls too, how to use hammers and saws and how to basically have some competence
Yeah.
with construction. But on the other side, and this is your adventure, you need to spend more time researching housing construction and what kind of techniques would be best suited to where we're going. And we don't know
Hmm.
where we're going, but nevertheless, we know
Yeah.
we aren't going to, for instance, one of the things I have this, you may notice a bookshelf over here. What am I doing? Can't find it. It's in reverse. There's a bookshelf right there. And I just built that. And, but the wood on it was super expensive and it's just
Yeah.
pine. And, we're moving into a world where these things are becoming wood is becoming more expensive, much more expensive. Now in America, we still have a good, pile of wood, so it's not super expensive, but nevertheless, to think about things like what are the best materials to use? What how we make so many houses in America where we take all this pine, make frames out of it, and then come along 40 years later and knock the thing down and put something else there. Whereas in Switzerland, I remember when I was there, I would go back at different years, and there was one place that some friends of mine let me stay in, a little mini chalet that was actually a kind of a sausage and cheese curing hut. And this thing had been there for 400 years, 500 years, 450. And to me, as a Christian, I'm saying that's what I need to build. I need to build the thing that will last, because it's not just a question of following the Ten Commandments. It's also a question of building a world that respects the relationship that God has given us with everything. And so many materials now that we use or are forced to use. I mean, I went to a large furniture warehouse with multiple vendors here, a very large, size of about 2 football fields. And I had trouble finding anything that was made out of real wood.
Yeah.
And I like real wood, but I don't like whatever this plastic junk that's being molded into wood is, you know,
Yeah.
this strange stuff. So it's doing research on materials, doing research on your side on techniques, doing research. For one of the interesting things for me is when I lived in Alaska for 22 years, people were often building their own houses. Now, some of them were built rather cheaply, but a lot of them were built with a lot of care, and people would do timber framed houses and stuff like this. And I looked at that and I go, like, oh, that's pretty nice. It's done with a quality to it. And I think that's, to me, that's just as much a part of my Christian outlook as, not hurting and not killing people is. That is to say that whatever the Ten Commandments are, there's also that God wants us to care for the world. And so
Hmm.
part of caring for the world is to create a world you actually want to live in. And one of the
Yeah.
problems with pollution and such, I mean, people often get in this whole, what's causing climate change? To which I'm saying, like, well, it really doesn't matter. What matters is you shouldn't live like a pig. You should, and in fact, pigs often live better than you do. You should live with some respect in the home you are. You should, Jordan Peterson at one point talks about, you need to, once you cleaned your room, do you need to go on and make it beautiful? He says, and beauty scares people. Even when you're making a room better, it scares people because they'll want to say, oh, you can do this so much quicker, you know? So that's my
Yeah.
suggestion for you, is to teach kids. That's a great thing to do, but also to improve your skills and get a vision of construction, which is something we obviously need, but in such a way, that you feel like there's something of your own calling within it that's more than just simply the assemblage of some flat building or something, but whereas what you're making has beauty to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that that's the thing that I, um, because like right now, I work. It's ridiculous the pace of the construction markets here, but it is, the quality is not the best a lot of
No.
times, and it's frustrating because I mean I want because I know how to do most of the stuff the best way, um, but sometimes there's a sort of balance I think too between like and I do appreciate like a beautiful aesthetic and things like that. I like to build furniture, and that's something I think you need to really take your time for. But then there's also kind of the there's this kind of tripod of making things. You have time, you have money, and you have quality, and you can always have two, but not the third, or
Mhm.
to a certain degree. So
Right.
you can have it good and cheap, but it's going to cost a lot. You can have it good and uh, or it's going to take a long time, I should say. You can have it good and quick, but it'll cost a lot. Or you can have it quick and fast, but it's not going to be good. So,
Right.
um,
No, and
uh,
I understand your situation in San Antonio. It's one of the fastest growing cities in America.
yeah,
And have all these people coming to Texas because they're trying to get out of places like California. So naturally, you have to do that and you have to support your family, and there's a lot of work. And
oh
I guess
yeah,
what I'm talking about is something to shoot for down the road, something to help you with that triangle.
yes. Well, I mean, I'd say though, I mean, this is another kind of thing that I talked to somebody about this a little bit. Part of my thinking in this model was it's not an accident that Jesus is a carpenter and that his disciples are fishermen and other um, they're not the academic elite. And then even Paul, who is an academic, he's a tent maker. And the thing that I thought was really interesting about being a tent maker is that a tent is a temporary structure that it has that essence of we have to do something to take care of the now because we need a roof over our head, but this isn't the final thing, and
Right.
it's looking forward to something better. And so
Right.
I think that's the kind of the balance of that, because there's a wisdom in knowing like you could always do the best most amazing job on everything, but that's kind of a waste of time for a lot of stuff. If it can be, so it's knowing what the best amount of time to spend on things is.
Hmm. Hmm. I just lost your sound.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, it was
I hear
back.
you. I hear you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So
well, it's a difficulty. For instance, here in Tbilisi, they're building straight up. It's all cement,
yeah,
a cement and then some kind of cinder block that they build the stages, then they put cinder blocks, then they put some sort of mud on the outside, and maybe if they get lucky, they'll put something. But you look at the newer buildings being built, and they're just being built quickly so that people make money,
hmm,
and they're not being made well. Now, of course,
yeah,
one of the problems in this area is they occasionally get big earthquakes, and those buildings aren't going to do anything. So it's a question, oops, it's a question of, you know, like I say, I think we have to shoot for the best we can do.
yeah,
And now, obviously there are priorities. So feeding your family is a priority. You know, doing the work that's there is a priority. But how will you feel in 20 years if that's all you do? It's kind of like I often say that about time and the way we live in time is that if you do the same thing over and over and over, like work in a factory or something like that, or work in an office, some repetitious functions, you lose your sense of time because you can't remember any of it. So to me, it seems like the goal in living when it comes to work, and maybe I need to make a video on this more, but is that work has to be meaningful.
Hmm.
And our society pushes us towards the money and the speed, the time to make it as quick as possible. But and what is the answer? How does one do those three things without losing one of them? The time and the money and the quality. And I think one of the things we have to work on, besides whatever's happening in the big world, is we need to think about those kinds of things and ask serious questions about what do we do? We don't have the answer. I don't see an answer here. I don't see an answer there. And I know, there in America, you go straight out that way most of the time. Here, you go up because, and of course you have corrupt uh, contractors here who will say, yeah, we're building 7 stories, and they build 10 so
Yeah.
they can make more money.
Yeah. I guess I would say, like, I think, yes, it does have to be meaningful, but I think that's kind of the what I've learned, and that what I want to share with others is what we think will be meaningful is not what makes it meaningful. Because uh, it's something with the knowledge that you're doing it for God and that this is your purpose.
Now, I
Um,
disagree, and here's why.
well,
I think that the thing itself has to be made meaningful. That is to say,
I think that it is made meaningful when you understand that, like, and not because I'm not saying that bad quality or anything like that. Because I would say from my own experience, I have to do an awful lot of, like, fairly mundane things
yeah,
about things that people never think about.
right.
But if I'm, but it can become a meaningful experience because of what I am learning in doing it,
Oh, yeah.
and that I'm participating in, like, I am working with the Lord in doing that. And um,
Yeah, well,
I think that,
you have a personal meaning that you derive from it, and that is for sure. And that God could teach you through that, no doubt about that whatsoever. But ultimately, I think we have to make sure that the things we make ourselves are worth making. And here, that's
yeah,
where the problem is, because our society, for instance, what is the point of getting a smartphone every 5 years, a new one? What is, I'm just simply saying, what is the point of that? What is the point of I remember walking into a lawyer's house in New York City. I was doing house painting, and every kid in that family, this was like around 1986, each one had a personal laptop, each one had a television, each one had there was something else they had that was kind of fancy. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's not the point. you know but also having these things, they're impersonal things. And if we are to take care of things in the world, we have to understand the difference between an impersonal thing and a personal thing. Or as this guy, Christopher Alexander, talks about, he's an architect, very interesting guy from a Catholic background. He says, we have to make living architecture and living spaces for that architecture. And what we've done in architecture is created dead spaces. So if you go to the center of any town, USA, any big city, you're going to find a lot of dead buildings that are made out of glass and steel. And while somebody had to work on those and make money, and I don't begrudge that at all, somebody else should really take the time to figure out how to do this better, because we are killing ourselves in terms of our own approach to life by building a world that's just screens, that's just dead building space, that's just places for highways. And we need, in order to, people talk about, yeah, we need the ecology and stuff. I said, you know what? If you don't know how to even take care of a house, if you don't know how to take care of your backyard garden, you're not going to really care for the environment. You're just going to do a lot of virtue signaling, and nothing will be accomplished except maybe some social contagion hysteria which is what I think we're going to be facing on this kind of stuff. Whereas meanwhile, I think God gave us the world to improve and to make as good as possible. So my recommendation is simply, uh,
Yeah.
you are where you are, but where are you going? And how do you make
Yeah.
it more meaningful for you?
Well, yeah, I think that, I guess, because there is so much talk about this sort of thing, and I think it's, one of the reasons that a lot of people are being more attracted to the more traditional forms of Christianity and such things, as the art and the cathedrals and this, because that, does capture a sort of an idealized thing. But I think that, you know, the problem is that the belief that building a cathedral is meaningful keeps a lot of people from building something lesser. And there's kind of like, I think, a positive feedback cycle where in your doing things helps you learn about the Lord, understand his role, how you fit into it, what your purpose is for his plans, and then that will improve the work, and then that'll improve your understanding of your place in the world, and it grows. So I mean, that's why,
Yeah.
because I'm more concerned about people than things. At the end of the day, I think that,
No, you're right. People are more important than things. But we also have to remember the world that people grow up in, the world that
yeah,
we live in, and that has an effect upon us.
yeah,
We've only got 2 more minutes here, and it's going to shut
okay,
down, and I don't want to do this one, again. So we can
yeah,
talk some other time. Obviously, there's much more to talk about.
sure,
And
yeah.
I've appreciated talking with you. And yeah, there's a lot. Do you have any last thing to say? We got about a minute and a half.
Well, yeah, people should buy old tools. That'll help. That'll inspire you to build something nice,
Very good.
a high quality antique.
Yeah, yeah, because many of those old tools also still work.
Yeah, they work better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
a good recommendation.